Good evening and welcome to tonight's regional news. We begin in Venezuela. For some children in Venezuela, garbage is the main source of their livelihood. This has been the case for several generations of garbage collectors in Venezuela, among them Ronakiel Brito, 16, who, like his mother when she was a child, and before her, her grandmother, looks for something of value every day in a landfill on an arid plain about 5 hours west of the capital, Caracas. But their work has never been so challenging. The nation's acute economic crisis, coupled with stay-at-home orders prompted by the coronavirus pandemic, have reduced trash output, making valuable findings rare. Waste has been drastically reduced during the pandemic, particularly food from homes, restaurants, and wholesale markets. That trash was coveted by garbage pickers in Barquisimeto, once a thriving agro-industrial city where food waste was notable. In Pavia, few follow pandemic-related guidelines. People rarely wear masks, and virtually no one is aware of maintaining physical distance. Most clean their hands with limitations because water is also scarce there. The government has reported less than 150,000 cases and more than 1,300 deaths of COVID-19. And now for some more news. Drug maker Pfizer employed high-level bullying against at least 2 Latin American countries during negotiations to acquire vaccines, according to a recent investigation, including requesting the nations put several assets as collateral for payments. According to the year-long investigation, which relied on unnamed officials, Pfizer bullied nations during talks. A year into the coronavirus pandemic, which has killed more than 2.6 million people worldwide, nations are scrambling for access to vaccine, a key to saving lives and reopening battered economies. But there is also growing evidence that wealthier nations have had unfair advantages. The World Health Organization has called on wealthy countries not to hoard vaccines, and developing nations have appealed to them to share the scientific knowledge and technology so that developing nations can begin producing the inoculations. But now there are also reports that mistreatment of developing nations is coming from pharmaceutical companies. Brazil and Argentina have vaccinated only 5% and 3.9% respectively. In Mexico, only 2.7% have received shots. Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador have vaccinated only about 1% of their population. Other countries such as Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador have yet to start. Continuing in St. Lucia, employers are being warned against making it mandatory for employees to take the COVID-19 vaccine, which the St. Lucia Employees Federation said could open the door to legal action. Since the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine across the island and around the world, there seems to be some hope to many of a return to some form of normality, especially for employers. The vaccine has been seen to provide a lifeline to businesses that rely on face-to-face customer service. Several businesses around the island have been impacted in one way or the other as a result of employees contracting the virus and taking extensive sick days at the expense of the employer in some cases. In the United States and other countries, employers are allowed to adopt mandatory COVID-19 vaccination policies. But can a company mandate its staff to be vaccinated in St. Lucia? According to the executive director of the Employers Federation, Goretti Paul, while the U.S. may be able to make it mandatory for persons to take their vaccine, there in St. Lucia, the Labor Act does not allow us to do that. And finally, on the international scene, the latest abduction took place late Thursday night at the Federal College of Forestry Mechanization of FACA in the Igabi local government area of Kaduna State, police said. The state's Commissioner for International Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Aruan, said in a statement that about 30 students, a mix of males and females, are yet to be accounted for. Several staff members of the school were also kidnapped, he added. An unspecified number of the students were injured and are receiving medical attention at a military facility. Nigerian authorities also said the bandits were behind the earlier abduction of 279 schoolgirls late last month in the Northwest, referring to the groups of armed men who kidnapped for money or to press for the release of jailed members of their groups. Those girls were later freed following negotiations with the government, and it is not known whether a ransom was paid. The mass abduction sparked international outcry and prompted the hashtag #BringBackOurGirls campaign. Of the 276 girls taken, more than 100 are still missing nearly 7 years later. And that is all for your regional news. Thank you for joining.